Print servers in federal environments create risk and unnecessary complexity. Every new printer, location, or policy adds strain to infrastructure that was never built for today's demands. FedRAMP High Authorized Printer Logic eliminates print servers with a secure cloud-native, zero-trust solution designed for federal IT. With advanced security, centralized control, and simplified management, agencies can modernize print without added burden. See what secure serverless printing looks like. Visit Vasion.com to learn more.
Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
And now, the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton, sponsored by GEHA.
Welcome to the Federal Drive on Federal News Network. It's Tuesday, August 25th. I'm your host, Terry Gerton, and I'm glad you're here. Coming up on this hour of the Federal Drive, the SBA wants to change who qualifies as a small business. The proposal could reshape which companies remain eligible for federal contracting programs. Plus, expanding access isn't just about who qualifies for government programs. DARPA is testing whether a new front door can help more companies get their ideas in front of decision makers. Those stories and much more ahead during this hour of the Federal Drive. We begin with this. The Small Business Administration is trying to open the federal contracting door to more small businesses. In a proposed rule issued last week, SBA is updating the small business size standards that would make more than 114,000 companies eligible for small business contracts. For more on what SBA is proposing and the initial reaction from the small business community, Federal News Network's executive editor, Jason Miller, joins me now. Jason, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Terry.
So SBA's proposed changes would add 114,000 companies into the small business category. How exactly would that work?
As one small business lawyer told me, this is a shock to the system. This is not just a small change. This is a major rethinking of how the small business community would work and how the small business size standards would apply to, as you said, Terry, more than 110,000 new companies. Now, what SBA did was they took a two-step approach. First, they looked at all the current size standards, which, let's look at this. They haven't been updated since 2022, and that was just for inflation by itself. So it's been almost 4 years, and every 5 years, the Small Business Act requires the Small Business Administration to update these size standards. And that makes sense. A lot of times they're done just because of inflation, because as inflation changes, obviously they want more updates as things get more expensive or hopefully cheaper. But one of the things that the SBA did was they looked at all the ones that are revenue-based. And many say to be considered a small business, you have to have revenues under this much over the last so many years. And then they looked at the ones that are employee-based. If your company has more than X amount of employees, you're no longer considered small. And the goal there is just to look at the industry sectors and level the playing field. And what SBA did, and this is fascinating, is not only did they increase the revenue-based size standards, they also increased the employee-based size standards and then moved some that used to be revenue-based, right, into the employee-based. So they really did take all these size standards and shake them up, and they came out in a much different looking way. And let me just give you a couple quick examples because I thought this was fascinating. One big example, and this is one of the biggest increases, they talk about media streaming, social networks, and other media networks. If you're playing by the NAICS codes at home, right, it's 5162. That's also a big change. They went from a 6-digit NAICS code to a 4-digit NAICS code. But the old size standard for considered small was $47 million. Under this proposed rule, the new one would be $970 million. So a $923 million increase for the small business. There's so many like that across the board. I mean, Terry, one of the most popular ones that we see with the small businesses is the ones under technology, computer programming, computer services. And the example there I like to point out is it used to be 34 million, and now it's 531 million. So a small business in the computer world, so it's a common NAICS code that a lot of the contracts are put at, would increase by something like 500%, so some huge amount. And I think what this is doing is really saying, the SBA is saying a couple things from this. Number one, they're saying, hey, the way this has been done before just hasn't been keeping up. And second, they're trying to address a longstanding complaint in the small business community that said, because the NAICS codes have not been increased. The size standards have not been increased over the last several years and has not kept up in anything but really inflation. A lot of small businesses are exiting the market. And SBA is really trying to say, hey, we want to keep small businesses in the market longer. And as we look at the bigger industrial complex, small businesses, what they were 10, 15, 20 years ago, doesn't mean the same thing as they are today.
There's a lot to unpack there, and folks will have to parse those rules pretty closely, but they also changed the methodology for how to decide whether a size standard needs to be increased. So what did they do there?
The good news is they said almost all of them had to be increased. And the ones that didn't, I think something to the effect of like 45 or so, they didn't change those at all. They didn't decrease anything. But what they did was the methodology they updated. And the last time the methodology was changed was in 2024 during the Biden administration. And this administration obviously feels like that change did not really reflect how size standards should be looked at. So one of the things they did, and this is, again, another proposed rule that people can comment on, and they can say, first, they looked at the total size of all participants in that industry group or industry. That includes for-profit businesses, nonprofit entities, and government-owned entities. The second, they looked at distinct geographical markets in which the competition takes place. And finally, the adjustment for imports and exports to account for international competition faced by domestic firms. So this was a whole different change and approach to this methodology. And again, Terry, this is a proposed rule, not final, so things will be changed. And one of the things I've heard, and this is what's really interesting about what SBA decided to do, was they released both the new methodology and the new size standards at the same time. And from the folks I've talked to, someone like John Shiraka, a former SBA official who ran the government contracting office for SBA several years ago, he goes, that just is not done. We've not seen that ever done before. Usually it's done in a step by step. Usually the methodology is released and they get comments and then they make updates. Then they release maybe the first set of changes, maybe for services, and then maybe they do products, or they do employee-based and then revenue-based. But to do it at the same time, he goes, that has also shaken up the system.
So what else are you hearing from the small business contracting experts? Was it a good idea to do them both together, or do they have other concerns about the rules and the methodology here?
That is one of the major concerns, that SBA made all these changes at once and changed the methodology at once. And if you think about it, what tends to happen, and this is what happened during the Biden administration, they changed the methodology, then they put out a proposed rule for the changes to the revenue-based size standards. Now, that proposed rule never got out of proposal. It never got to final, and they never got to the point where they put out a change to the employee-based size standard. So again, both of those were on tap to be updated, but never got through the entire process. So the fact they put them out together is odd and surprising. The second bigger thing here is they've limited this to a 30-day comment period. And I think we'll talk about this in a second, but that's also a big concern. That's a really short amount of time. And Terry, this was released last Tuesday, so about a week ago. And already the two proposed rules have received limited comments, 10 for small business methodology and about 65 as of today for the small business proposed size standard changes. At the same time, what the SBA also did that kind of was a little bit of a red flag for folks I've talked to, John Shiraka, I also talked to Eric Crucius, a procurement lawyer with Hutton, Andrews & Kurth, is that they're estimating the number of new small businesses that would enter that market. And at least John Shiraka believes that's way underestimated. So, for instance, they looked at, again, I talked about the computer services, the programming one. They believe this would only add about 1,300 more small businesses to the market. And John Shiraka said that may be nice, that may be true in some ways, but think about all those people who said, I'm not going to enter the federal market because it's too complicated, it's too much going on. But wait a minute, now I can be a small business. Now I can be eligible for set-asides. Now I could take advantage of all those things that the government does for small businesses. Maybe I will enter the market. And the concern is that they'll flood the market and the competition will be much more steep. And whether or not the administration raises the small business goals, or does Congress raise the small business goals, giving now you have 114,000 more small businesses entering the market. So those are some of the concerns. I think the last one I'll just mention real quick is when you make size standards that large, right? When you go from 50 million to 450 million as an example for one of them, the concern here is that's not going to just bring in more companies. It's really going to flood the market with current ones that are considered medium-sized businesses. And while some people like Amani Augustus, who is the director of the Center for Entrepreneurial Opportunity at Third Way, which is a DC-based think tank, says that's been a big problem for a long time, the mid-sized companies. I'm not sure the answer is to flood them into the small business market. I think the answer is to figure out ways to ensure that there's fair competition and that the playing field is as level as possible.
Jason, you mentioned a 30-day comment period. Fill us in on the details of the timeline here.
Comments are due back to the SBA for both of these proposed rules by September 21st. So time is ticking. People should get their comments in. This is really important, I think, to comment, both positively, negative, what's in there, what's not in there, what's missing, what did SBA not think of. I think that's really been an encouragement from people like Eric Crucius, the lawyer that I talked to, or John Shiraka, or others in the community. More specifically about the proposed methodology change, SBA is asking for 6 specific questions that they want answered about their change. So I think folks should really focus on that methodology change and how they're going about it. Because again, this is what will drive changes in the future. Now, yes, a new SBA could come in, and yes, they could, under a new administration, change that methodology again. But I think generally speaking, I think SBA likes to keep their methodology intact because it takes a lot to change it, but also has a big downward effect. And then the other thing I think we look out for is congressional interest in this. Right now, I've not heard any letters. I've not seen any hearings scheduled. But I think as the small business community says, hey, this is great or this is not great, and whatever reaction they give you, that will get Congress involved, especially when you're seeing such huge increases in those size standards. Again, I'll just go back to the computer science and computer services one. It went from 34 million to 531 million, Terry. If it went from 34 million to 100 million, okay, people could say, okay, we're all in the same body of water. But a $450 million company is much bigger than a $50 million company competing in that body of water. And I think that could drive a lot of congressional interest. And hey, I'm a small business. I can't compete with such a large business, even though they are no longer considered large under this proposed rule. So I think that further reaction is going to be also what's really going to be interesting to watch.
That's Federal News Network's executive editor, Jason Miller. Jason, thanks for bringing us this story. Certainly a lot to watch over the next few weeks.
Always fun in the small business world. Thank you, Terry.
You can find his story at federalnewsnetwork.com. Up next, behind SBA's proposed changes is a larger question about growth. As companies expand, how should federal contracting programs adapt without losing their focus on small business? This is the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. The Small Business Administration is proposing one of its most significant updates to business size standards in years. The changes could affect which firms qualify for federal contracting programs and how long successful companies remain part of the small business ecosystem. Here to discuss the proposal is Emily Murphy, Senior Fellow at the George Mason University Baroni Center for Government Contracting. Emily, thank you so much for joining me. It's great to see you.
It's wonderful to be with you, as always.
We have so much to talk about, and we're going to start with the new SBA proposed rule, redrafting the size methodology for what constitutes a small business. This got a lot of attention. What, from your perspective, were the headlines in the new rule?
So there are two things, I think. The fact that they introduced a new methodology and a new set of proposed size standards on the same day was interesting enough. But there are substantial growth in the size standards. I think 114,000 plus companies are going to now be considered small that weren't previously. And in some cases, those size standards, it's not the normal inflationary increases we're used to seeing of 5 million, 10 million. We're seeing increases of about $500 million for some industries. So the computer design goes from having I think it now will have a size standard that's gone from 34 million in annual receipts to 531 million in annual receipts. Consulting firms that are doing administrative management, general consulting go from 24.5 million in receipts to 295 million in receipts. Those two companies don't look a lot alike.
So how different is this from the size standard reviews we've seen in the past?
So we've only started doing these reviews as a result of the 2010 Jobs Act. So 2011 was the first time we started seeing these. And interestingly, at the time, SBA did something similar where they consolidated a bunch of the size standards, and Congress got upset because they said this is making too many businesses small. It's taking industries and it's sort of merging them together. And Congress actually came back and said, you can't do that. They changed the Small Business Act and said, you can't do that anymore. And so then we saw additional size standards come out at the 5-year that seemed more inflationary in their adjustments. This time around, we saw SBA take a different approach where they said, all right, we're not going to consolidate industries, but instead of using 6-digit NAICS codes, we're going to go and use 4 or 5-digit NAICS codes. So we're going to create families of NAICS codes. And they increased it. So I think they reduced it to about 335 size standards rather than over 1,000 size standards. So it's a very different approach to how they're looking at the problem. And when you look at what size standards do, I'm not sure that it all flows logically. For SBA size standards do things like they help make sure that small businesses who can't get loans elsewhere can get a government guaranteed loan. But a $531 million company is not going to be going after an SBA 7A loan. Frankly, they're going to be getting their credit elsewhere. So this isn't really for those companies. It's not really for the companies needing entrepreneurial assistance through SBA's entrepreneurial development programs. It's possibly going to address some cases where rulemaking has to look at whether or not a small business is affected. And so in those cases, maybe a larger size standard makes sense. But then you get the government contracting area, and that's where it's going to really change what can be set aside. And it's interesting because SBA not only consolidated the industries, but they sort of ignored another part of their statute. If you look at 15 U.S.C. 644, it actually says, hey, SBA, in the cases where a NAICS code doesn't adequately define what the government buys or how it buys it, feel free to break those apart into more size standards, not consolidate them into one. Now, SBA has never used that authority. And it was meant to address, for example, that an AI company doesn't look like your average software company, or that a cybersecurity company might not look the same as a company that's providing help desk support. And that the government buys things differently than the NAICS codes, those North American Industrial Classification codes, might reflect, because it's a very different market. And so it was trying to say you can have a little bit more flexibility and authority to come in and try and tailor this so you're getting the right result. SBA instead is sort of saying, we're going to, no, we want to make sure that there's a growth path. And in many ways, they're going to be addressing the concern that mid-sized companies didn't have a place to fit. But I think you're also going to have a problem where the companies that were your traditional smalls are going to feel that they don't have a place to compete anymore.
Emily Murphy is Senior Fellow at the George Mason University Baroni Center for Government Contracting. Emily, let's follow that just like one more step farther, because I'm still struggling with the underlying logic here. People don't sit around and come up with new NAICS codes over the weekend just because it seems like a fun party game. Why do this, and why take this approach? Are they trying to provide more opportunity for small business set-asides? Are they trying to create longer pathways for growth? What do you think is behind it?
I think both of those are part of the logic. I think there's also a desire to simplify it. 1,000 size standards is a lot of size standards. It can lead to some abuse when we used to call it NAICS code shopping. So that something would be set aside to try and limit competition using one NAICS code. And you ended up with protests around which NAICS code was assigned to a procurement, because it could affect who could compete. And I think there's a logical idea that a lot of companies that are in, this is an old example, a lot of companies that do architectural work also do engineering work. So because there's a lot of overlap, maybe it makes sense to combine them into a size standard. And that was one of the arguments back in 2011. The problem being that the companies that only do architecture work are a lot smaller than the companies that do architecture and engineering. And there was a concern that wasn't going to let those architectural companies that are small companies really still compete in the space. So I think there's a legitimate desire to simplify this. And we've seen this across administrations. We saw the Bush administration tried to do something similar back in 2004 when they tried to simplify size standards. We saw as I said, in 2011, we saw the Obama administration try to simplify it by reducing the number of size standards. We're seeing it again now. So there's this There really is this thought process that our current system is very complicated and we're making small businesses try and figure this out. And in some ways, it limits their growth. There's also in limiting growth, in some ways, it protects parts of industry in other ways. And it's a really tough balance. I'm not sure that this gets it right.
One of the recurring debates that we keep hearing in federal contracting is whether successful firms benefit from these programs long after they've established themselves. And we saw that argument again during the recent debate over the SBIR mills and the SBIR reauthorization earlier this year. Do you think these are connected?
I think they are. And I think that there's always this concern of, are large businesses benefiting from small business contracts? At the same time, how do we make sure that small businesses have the ability to grow into something that's other than small? And again, this is an argument that's been going on for decades, where it used to be that you could, if you won a contract as a small business, you could continue to perform it as a small business for the life of that contract. And then we started saying, oh, no, but if you're acquired, you have to recertify. Now at the time of option, you need to recertify. At no more than 5 years, you must recertify. So we're always trying to make sure that the companies getting that and benefiting from the program are true small businesses and they're meeting the intention of the program. In doing so, that we also risk, though, creating disincentives to growth. So again, SBA is always struck with this balancing program. We're seeing it again. CSIS just came out with an article looking at what really happens with the SBIR mills, or the companies that are considered SBIR mills. I don't think that any company out there identifies themselves as a SBIR mill. And these are the companies that submit a lot of phase 1 and phase 2 proposals. And the question's always been, are these companies just exploiting the program and getting a lot of lower dollar phase 1, phase 2 awards and never really commercializing? Or are these companies that really love the R&D process, love coming in, generating ideas, and then they successfully transition them or they sell them and they end up being commercialized elsewhere? It's been a fascinating argument over the years, because I think Thomas Edison has been misquoted, I don't know how many times, but talking about how many times he failed in trying to invent a light bulb. And I've read it as 100, I've read it as 500, I've read it as 1,000. I don't know what the real number is, but each failure, his point was he learned something. And to the extent that companies that do a lot of SBIRs are doing iterative R&D at small dollar value, $50,000, $100,000 tranches, where they're making progress, that's a good deal, or can be a very good deal for taxpayers. If all they're doing is just putting something out there, getting that $50,000, turning in a piece of paper that doesn't actually turn into something, then that's a really bad deal, because that means we're denying opportunities to truly innovative companies. And the CSIS research paper that came out from my former colleague, Jerry McGinn, was really interesting, because it came in and said, wait a second here. If we look at how often these end up commercializing, and if we look at how many patents come out of these, we actually see that companies that do a lot of this, that they end up commercializing at a higher rate in some cases and patenting their technologies at a higher rate. And I've always thought that the argument we're having here might not be the right argument, because the argument isn't how many times should a company be able to get a SBIR, but what are the results of the SBIRs that a company's getting? A few years ago, I actually wrote something that I think you all published in Federal News Network that said what we really should be doing is better job with past performance on SBIRs, and asking the people who are receiving the phase 1 and the phase 2 results to evaluate whether or not this moved the needle. Did we learn something that advanced the R&D in this? Is this getting us closer to our goal? And then sharing that information so that as companies are assessed for their next round of SBIRs, if they're moving things forward, that's considered positive. If they haven't, if they're seen to be just someone who's generating, that's considered negative. And then, so we're not trying to apply a one-size-fits-all standard. We're actually looking at the performance of a company itself. It would also have the advantage then of having better information out there on what we're learning, so that we could share it across agencies with SBIR authority. And ultimately, at the end of the phase 2s, when every agency can do phase 3s, making that information available so that other agencies can leverage what has been learned, and we can commercialize it better across the federal government, not just in the agency that paid for the initial R&D.
Emily Murphy is Senior Fellow at the George Mason University Baroni Center for Government Contracting and former GSA Administrator. Emily, I really appreciate your insight here. The small business space is one that we have to continue to watch.
The small business space, that's where I got my start. So I started in government contracting at the Small Business Committee back in the mid-1990s. And this is all stuff that's near and dear to my heart.
Well, thanks for joining me today and sharing your insights on this one.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Terry.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts. Still to come, Special Operations Command wants to hear from companies that have never sold it anything. A new acquisition effort is designed to lower the barriers that keep many firms from competing in the first place. But first, expanding access isn't just about who qualifies for government programs. DARPA is testing whether a new front door can help more companies get their ideas in front of decision makers. You're listening to The Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Welcome back to The Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Through a platform called ERIS, DARPA is giving companies a new way to present emerging technologies to agency reviewers. The effort is designed to widen access to the defense innovation ecosystem without abandoning technical scrutiny. My next guests are Jennifer Thabit, Director of DARPA's Small Business Programs Office, and Nick Matiloff, the ERIS Deputy Program Manager. Jennifer and Nick, I'm so glad to have you both on the show today. Thank you for joining me.
We are so thrilled to be here. Thank you for having us.
Jennifer, you've got an exciting program here, the ERIS program. DARPA has no shortage of ways for companies to engage with the agency already. So where were you seeing a gap, or what kind of signal were you getting that there was a missing piece to the acquisition puzzle for DARPA?
Yeah, at DARPA, we used to talk about working with us in three main ways. We used to talk about programs, challenges, and other. And programs are great, but if you are new to working with the government, it would be very hard to get a program off the street. And challenges are fantastic entry points, but they're only good if there's a challenge out on the street. And so we've really made a concerted effort the last few years to build out that other category and really open our suite of entry points for innovation and collaboration. And really that's where ERIS fits in. ERIS is really maybe not filling a problem or a hole. ERIS is really offering sort of a front door to acquisition with a video submission, making it easier for you to join and work with us.
And so, Nick, you're the Deputy Program Manager. How exactly does it work? If you're a company that wants to knock on that front door, what do you do?
So ERIS collects video submissions on a monthly rolling basis. So from the 1st of the month to the 30th, based on the given month. At month end, that group of solutions enters the review process. Similar to our traditional review process here at DARPA, those solutions are initially reviewed by SMEs, overseen by a DARPA program manager, who will make a final determination. For solutions that end up being posted, companies can expect to be provided with a welcome kit with some next steps. And for those who don't get posted, we provide tailored feedback on how that video was reviewed against the scoring rubric.
So let me follow up with you for a minute. I'm a company and I've created a better mousetrap in my garage and I want to sell it to DARPA. Is that the kind of video that you're talking about here?
Possibly not. I mean, we're looking for market disruptors, market leaders. We're looking for answers to critical defense technologies and those solutions. DARPA has a very high bar and a very specific niche that we operate in. We still operate under the DARPA charter, so we're still looking for those kind of early stage, low TRL technologies that are going to really push the envelope on what's possible. So potentially not the new mousetrap, but I will say that we are looking for ideas from anybody who can answer those problems that we pose in our topic areas.
And Jennifer?
Yeah, and let's build off of that a little bit, right? So at DARPA, we're really looking for those revolutionary, not evolutionary ideas, right? But the challenge is, as Nick said, really those come from these new technologists, these new innovators. And so ERIS was really designed to make that entry point easy. No more do you need a Pentagon pedigree, right? Or a PhD in proposal writing. You need a video camera and a computer. And that's all you need to start joining and showing us your ideas. And so that was really where we are looking for those innovative ideas.
And so, Jen, as you've rolled out this new approach, do you have evidence that ERIS is bringing these new entrants into DARPA's orbit?
Yeah, I love that because we do. Like, we were designed to really bring in new non-traditionals and a lot of small businesses, right? And so the strongest evidence we really have is that since the launch of ERIS, 76% of the organizations that were deemed awardable, they're new to DARPA. And of those, we have 48% new to the Department of War. But in fact, we don't stop there. Currently, of the awardable solutions on our marketplace, 67% are from small businesses and 68% are from non-traditionals. Now, it's good to say that we have awardable solutions, but what does that mean? Where does that go from there? And so I can tell you that ERIS is also translating that participation into contracts and awards. We're going from awardable solutions to awards being made off the marketplace, not just by DARPA, but also by other parts of the Department of War.
Jennifer Thabit is Program Director of DARPA's Small Business Programs Office, and Nick Matiloff is the ERIS Deputy PM. Nick, let me come back to you then, as Jennifer's just walked us through those exciting metrics. You really do have a lot of new folks at the door. Give us some examples maybe of some technology that ERIS has surfaced that DARPA might have otherwise missed.
Yeah, so I'm reticent to go into any specific technologies, but I really do want to emphasize the numbers that Jen just stated, because I think that figure really shows that we're hearing solutions from people who weren't finding their way into the DARPA ecosystem through traditional means. And it's not just DARPA's radar either that's discovering these new technologies. Other .mil users with ERIS accounts are already making awards off of our platform. So we're sharing that new wealth of ideas with our partners in the department already.
That's really exciting, and I didn't realize that ERIS is sharing the portfolio with other organizations. Walk us through maybe how that works and how you balance access. Who gets first pick?
Yeah, so we offer access to ERIS to any .mil user who creates an account. They can surf through all of our awardable solutions, just like any DARPA program manager can. One of the, I think, absolute highlights of ERIS is that if you have a solution on the marketplace, it's not just a one-time award. If you have a solution that's interesting to a DARPA PM or a PM at another .mil agency who's interested, they could both negotiate with you and make an award off of that solution. So we're not limiting to one award or to one agency who's interested. We do right now under ERIS, we do limit our award vehicles to other transactions, which I think is a demand signal that DARPA is looking to do business differently. So we do require that a .mil agency who wants to utilize ERIS has OT authority, but right now those are kind of our only barriers. As long as they have an actual interest in making awards, we're happy to help them.
So Nick, let me stick with you and take it to maybe the next level. As you're making it easier for organizations to reach you with their great ideas, have you noticed maybe a tip in the balance to where you're just overwhelmed with submissions? You can't really process them fast enough and folks are waiting to hear?
No, not at all. I don't think so. I think that it's very clear in the evaluation criteria and the scoring rubric that we post publicly for the ERIS in the ERIS BAA. I think that although we've lowered the barrier to entry from a submission artifact perspective, DARPA has not taken their foot off the gas with respect to the competition of ideas that we're looking to cultivate. Our program managers are still looking for solutions that push the envelope of what's possible in addressing these critical defense challenges. We're looking to compete differently, but we are evaluating very similarly to how we already operate here at DARPA. That bar has not changed for us.
And Jen, let me come back to you then, because you're overseeing this program. How are you making sure that these submissions, now in video format, conform to the technical rigor that DARPA is known for?
Yeah, I think if we can kind of pull that thread a little more on what Nick was saying, right, our grading rubric on ERIS really ensures that there is technical rigor in each one of your proposals. Coupling that with the fact that at ERIS, we have guardrails. Your video submission, once deemed awardable, is only on our marketplace for a year, not only ensuring that you have had technical rigor demonstrated that you're on our marketplace, but ensuring that your idea is still fresh and new. And so at the end of a year, you will need to resubmit and get reaccepted to ERIS if you want to stay as an awardable solution holder on the marketplace.
And then, Jen, if someone came to you and said, we love this idea, we want to build our own ERIS marketplace, are there parts of this model that are transferable? And are there parts that really just rely on DARPA's culture and would only be appropriate there?
Yeah, so I would say the best advice to give is really before you think about building your own marketplace, really think about the fact that there are other marketplaces out there like Eris, and there are some similar marketplaces on Tradewinds and Platform One. It's always best to check first what is out there. And I'm biased, obviously, towards Eris. So it's always good to check on Eris because you can make awards off of Eris. And so it really cuts through timelines if you can find a solution that solves your problem that's already there and gone through competition. The other piece I would say is there are parts you could lift and shift, but something that makes our marketplace so unique and I think so attractive to other parts of the government is the fact that we have such technical rigor and we have such a strict grading rubric. So you know that something that's on that marketplace is truly something that we think is DARPA hard.
That's really helpful. And Nick, then as the Deputy PM here, are there changes in the forecast for the Eris model, things that will make it even better?
We have some new things in the works. We're currently working on our aggregator pilot, which we're excited to debut soon, but more to come.
I've been speaking with Jennifer Thabit. She's the Program Director of DARPA's Small Business Programs Office, and Nick Mataloff is the Eris Deputy PM. Thank you both for joining me today. Really excited to hear about this program.
Thank you, Terry.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Listen to the Federal Drive on your schedule. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up next, Special Operations Command wants to hear from companies that have never sold it anything. A new acquisition effort is designed to lower the barriers that keep many firms from competing in the first place. This is the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Defense agencies have spent years trying to speed up acquisition. SOCOM is targeting a different problem. Many companies with promising technologies never enter the competition at all. A new initiative is designed to make it easier for firms with little government contracting experience to get in front of decision makers. Here to explain how Soft Racer works is Brian Miller, president of BM&T. Brian, thanks for joining me. It's great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me, Terry.
It's an interesting topic here, Special Operations Forces and Acquisition. SOCOM has been experimenting, I guess you might say, with faster acquisition methods for a long time. You're leading a new approach here. What are you trying to get after? What's not working?
You're absolutely right. SOCOM has been the department's pathfinder, if you will, for many years. I could think SoftWorks, technology sprints, OTAs. Soft Racer isn't a correction of that history. I think it's an industrialization of it. And what I mean is the gap was never authority or intent. I think it was standing infrastructure, right? So sprints and challenge-like events are episodic at best. So they're like a bunch of great first dates. A consortium, which Soft Racer is, runs continuously. Problems in, competitions out, repeatedly, with the flywheel speeding this up as we go along if we're doing our job well. So it's like a real relationship now between the Defense Innovation Base and, in this case, SOCOM, but any government organization that would set up something similar. The genuinely new part of this is the operating model. It's a consortium that is purpose-built for the fixed price era, something you and I have talked about in the past. The government pays us and our partner GovSignals a firm fixed price to perform. Companies in the ecosystem pay nothing. There's no membership fee and there's no fee on any awards they get through this consortium. So the bottom line is that this isn't another pilot of something. It's a standing capability that, frankly, BM&T has been training over a decade to deliver.
You used a couple of terms there that I think of as being in conflict with each other. Industrialization of infrastructure, which I think of as being slow, process repeatable. You always get the same thing out at the end. And then you talked about flexible and driving new requirements. Tell me how you reconcile those two concepts.
Oh, absolutely. So the industrialization is a reference to just the discipline we're trying to put in place to a process and the infrastructure that reduces the friction to emerging technology companies, and particularly companies that have probably never worked with the government or even the military before. So there has to be, and that's on us and our partner GovSignals, to create that. It's not going to be frictionless. It can't be, because of the missions that these companies will be focused on, what our client SOCOM is focused on. But we're trying to reduce that friction as much as possible. So the command is sharing in terms that the market can understand what it needs. And the companies, in the simplest and quickest way, can share some solution ideas, and that they can meet in the middle through this platform.
As you are thinking about reaching these, as the press announcement calls, non-traditional companies, what are you finding that they don't know about what they don't know about working with SOCOM?
I think of this as a commentary, if you will, on the larger acquisition problem, which has been talked about in lots of different forums for many years, and we've made a lot of strides there. Authorities isn't the problem anymore, thanks to the great work of policymakers in Congress and the Pentagon, early days of the Defense Innovation Unit, OT's work, CSO's work, and SOCOM has used them as well as anyone for years, going back to your first question. What I think has been unresolved is that federal innovation has two halves that don't get built on their own. And every reform over the years has kept fixing kind of the pipe between them rather than either end of that pipe. So one half is supply. Those are the companies. So you asked about what's it like from their perspective. So most of the ones the department wants, I think, have never entered the system. They've never been part of the defense innovation base, if you will. And honestly, dues of consortiums has never really been the barrier. A serious company can afford hundreds or thousands of dollars. But what the old model got wrong is more subtle. It told every company at the door, you are the revenue. And it paid the manager of those consortiums on dollar volume, right? More dollars through the pipe is more fees. Not on whether the right company showed up or whether those companies succeeded in accelerating the government organization's mission, and in this case, SOCOM. And then the other half of that is demand, the problems. So even when the right company shows up, the need is locked in requirements language that is tough for, say, an engineer who's never worked with the military to act on it. Somebody has to play translator. Somebody has to sit with the people who own the problems, rewrite them as something a founder can read and think, yeah, we can solve that. So we know, as BM&T, we know what happens when you fix both halves of that. Plain language problems, fast awards, a front door that doesn't cost anything, right? And SoftRacer is the combination of those things turned into standing infrastructure that the command can use.
Brian Miller is the president of BM&T. Brian, let's dig into that process that you were just describing for a minute, because the consortium that BM&T is leading here replaces traditional proposals with short solution briefs. As you try out that model, what are you seeing happen? How well is the government dealing with that approach?
So far, great. I mean, SOCOM deserves a lot of credit here for weighing all the options and choosing an innovative approach. And our partner, GovSignals, who's the prime on this effort, we're supporting them. They have an AI-first platform, which we believe is going to make this a lot easier for all the stakeholders involved. The government, the program offices at SOCOM, the companies that believe they align to the missions, the technology focus areas that those program offices care about. I think it's going to lead to less friction, more speed, an acceleration of learning, right? We mentioned a couple times in just this conversation that there are companies out there that have never worked with the government, never worked with the military, may not even know off the top of their head how they can align to these missions. And that's kind of our job, to figure out where that fit is and to set up these competitions in such a way that the warfighter, the end user, gets what they need, and the companies can see how they can make a difference and then can more easily compete for those opportunities.
Moving an organization like SOCOM that we already talked about was sort of on the leading edge of rapid acquisition practices to this new model might not be terribly difficult, but how hard would it be, do you think, to move other acquisition functions within the Pentagon or maybe even within other federal agencies to a model like SoftRacer?
I don't think it would be hard. I think it's just a matter of imagination, but that's a little abstract. I think it's a matter of just following this model. And what we intend to do, along with our partners, share, to the extent it's appropriate, how well this consortium is working. And for those other government organizations who might be looking at this like with interest, with curiosity, just follow along and see how well we do. We're pretty confident, but we're going to share evidence along the way. For example, how fast the cycles are between solicitation and award, not the volume of members in the consortium, but how well the mission is addressed over time, how many different technology areas of interest the command feels confident running through this consortium. And there's going to be a lot of things that I think will showcase for other government organizations how this new model might work for them, how they might want to tweak it or customize it for their mission. So I think the proof will be in the pudding. And if we're doing our job well, the evidence will suggest how other organizations could follow SOCOM's lead here and do something similar.
You've got some education sessions coming up for folks who might be interested in participating in the consortium. What are the things you most want them to know about how this will work?
I think just setting expectations appropriately. So from the outset here, explaining to them what SoftRacer is, how it might be different than other consortiums. That's not to say there aren't other good ones out there. This is a way to do a consortium, and we believe it's an innovative one. So we're going to share what it's all about, what it will look like when it's fully up and running, what they can do now in the short term to prepare, and when they can expect to see the first solicitations rolling through it. And then, as we offered publicly, we'll answer as many questions live as we can, and any we don't get to, we'll follow up with the companies. I think in the short term, what companies can do if they're listening is sign up for the wait list. It's govsignals.ai/SoftRacer. That's just where we're gathering a list of companies that are interested in joining the consortium, and they'll get more details and more updates from us in that way.
Brian Miller is the president of BM&T. Brian, thanks for joining me today. Really appreciate hearing more about this innovative solution.
Thanks for having me, Terry.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Listen to the Federal Drive on your schedule. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. The Air Force is requesting what's likely a record $10 billion facility construction budget for fiscal 2027, up from $3.9 billion in 2026. And when you add other construction projects like military family housing and facilities sustainment and restoration, the budget request skyrockets to almost $27 billion. All in all, federal agencies are planning to spend more money than ever on construction and maintenance projects in the coming years. Brigadier General Patrick Miller is the commander of the Air Force Civil Engineer Center. He talked about the facility investment plan with Federal News Network's Jason Miller.
As you alluded to, potential for a really big program in FY27, and we're leaning all into that through technology, through new authorities that were authorized in FY26 NDAA, specifically the push to use other transactional authorities in the construction realm. Typically, you see that in other arenas, but we now have the ability to use that in the construction area, which means we've got a lot more work ahead of us. And the workforce is the same. And so we need to figure out how do we get the best utilization out of our workforce to allow them to do the things that only they can do while capitalizing on technologies such as artificial intelligence to be able to take away some of those routine tasks and even, quite frankly, help us think through problem sets a little bit faster. Earlier this year, in April, the Air Force established and published their Department of Air Force data strategy as well as their artificial intelligence strategy. That set the foundation, recognizing officially that data is, a weapon system in and of itself. And the quicker we can access that data through the cloud, the more informed we're going to be across the board. A great example of where we did that recently is down at Tyndall Air Force Base. If folks recall, back in 2018, Tyndall was struck with a Category 5 hurricane, Hurricane Michael. And we had the opportunity to essentially start from a clean slate, something we haven't done in a while, to build what we termed then the installation of the future. And we used the Internet of Things. We started to pull in the different aspects of data, whether it's coming from utilities or installing the right monitors in new facilities, to be able to capture as much information as we can and then use that to get more predictive in our decisions. And so being able to aggregate all of that data into a central location, into a central repository, access that from different nodes so that our security forces, the defenders, the police department of the installation, can respond real world to incidents, as well as our civil engineers that are maintaining that installation. And so as we jump all into artificial intelligence and go from beyond where we are today to generative AI to agentic AI, we've got a lot of great opportunities ahead of us, and we're looking forward to capitalizing on those.
Artificial intelligence, AI, everyone loves talking about it these days. In the construction world, I'm really interested to understand a little more about how and where that's going to be applied, how it's being used today, some of the future. So, General Miller, I'll start with you. What's this Air Force starting to apply AI? Where are some of the opportunities today? Where do you see it going in the future?
Thanks for that. Yeah, I will tell you, we're excited about where we're going with AI. Right now, we're exploring generative AI to help advance designs faster. You heard a little bit earlier about how long it takes for construction to happen across the Department of War. Specifically, it could take anywhere from 7 to 10 years from requirement generation, if it's a military construction project, through design, execution, appropriation, and execution. So that's a long time. And so anything we can do to shrink that kill chain of construction puts our warfighters in a better position. Specifically for the Air Force, our installations are the power projection platform for aerospace and cyberspace. That's where we do our fly, fix, fight from. And so being able to advance construction speed and decrease cost through acquisition reform and construction reform allows us to arm our warfighters earlier to be prepared for the next fight. And so what we're looking at doing right now, as I'd mentioned, generative AI in designs, especially where we have standardized construction. Think dormitories, child development centers, fitness centers, hangars, things that are common across those power projection platforms. Can we come up with a design that is that standardized design and just needs to be site adapt based off of that location? And then you can bring in agentic AI and say, okay, site adapt for Alaska, site adapt for Florida. And it goes out and scrubs unified facilities criteria, international building code, local code, makes those adaptions. We can feed in new testing, whether it's on the environmental front or geotechnical front, to be able to accelerate that design. I'd mentioned earlier about using other transactional authorities. That also includes doing things like progressive design build or accelerated design build. The traditional construction model for the department has been design bid build or design build. While changing it to progressive design build gets earlier stakeholder involvement, which means we're not going through that initial design phase that we would originally do. So getting that design through generative AI is going to be important. And then as we start to look at in construction, one of the things that lengthens the process and increase cost and schedule is whenever we hit a modification, a change order, a request for proposal, or even a requirement owner changes a requirement. By bringing AI into that to help us capture that requirement, develop the right request for proposal, evaluate that proposal whenever it comes in to make sure it meets the right criteria, will increase that decision space, decrease the amount of time that we're lagging for that decision, hopefully help us identify the right supply chain to be able to get that, especially if we start to see a limitation in a certain component, propose some alternatives. So there's some great opportunities for AI to be able to accelerate construction from the very beginning of design all the way through actual execution to delivering something to the warfighter.
General Miller, I'm interested to maybe dig deeper into some of the use cases. Do you have some specific use cases today where you're starting to apply these technologies? And it can be kind of initial AI, to Andrew's point, how you define it, it's how you define it. But like, you're starting to see some changes where we're seeing by applying this type of technology, we've already cut time or cost or schedule, or what improvements are you already starting to see?
Yeah, as indicated, we are currently running a test case where we are designing a dormitory at one of our installations using generative AI. And so we're going to see how that plays out, compare it against the original construction or original designs that we have at other installations. Where I think we're going to start to see some benefit and some of the doors are going to open is typically in the Department of War, we use something called the Unified Facilities Criteria as an additive, and it can sometimes be more restrictive. If you assess some of the cost increases that happen inside a fence line of an installation versus outside the fence line of an installation, some of it is attributed to Unified Facilities Criteria, all developed for good reasons at the time. But we also have something called the International Building Code, and using AI to compare and then also scrub the supply chain to say, where does this make sense? Does it make more sense to use the International Building Code and seek a waiver to the Unified Facilities Criteria, or is the Unified Facilities Criteria the right thing? And depending on what's going on, maybe it offers an alternative part or piece for construction. And so those are the types of things that we are testing right now with the dormitory project. We are also looking at trying to refine cost estimates. Cost estimates were mentioned earlier. We typically use a lot of industry models, think RS means, or sometimes a proprietary model developed by one of our contractors that is doing recurring work in an installation on an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity type contract. But where we typically hit bumps in the road is on the cost side. Sometimes costs will exceed an approval threshold, and then all of a sudden we're going to have to seek a higher level of approval. Maybe that's in different levels inside the Pentagon. But by using AI, we're trying to get a better understanding of local supplies, cost indices, real-time cost data. Say something happens in the steel market or the cement market, and that's going to fluctuate the cost, or in the long time that it takes for a project to get through the system, costs have changed due to inflation. And so we're attacking AI to be able to help us get better at cost estimating because that has tended to be a challenge. And also an item of interest from Congress, especially on those military construction projects that are in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. And we've got some significant weapon systems that we're pursuing between Sentinel and the F-47 and B-21. Lots of construction coming up, and cost is typically at the center of the conversation for all of them.
That's Brigadier General Patrick Miller, the commander of the Air Force Civil Engineer Center. To watch his full conversation with Jason Miller, go to federalnewsnetwork.com. The Federal Drive with Terry Gerton is produced by Eric White and Michelle Sandiford. Our web editor is Stephanie Wright. For the latest updates, stay with federalnewsnetwork.com or follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. I'm Terry Gerton. Thanks for listening.